Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new IDOWorkHereLady stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "This Isn't a Fashion Choice." The uniform I wear at my job in a country park is a very drab grey polo shirt, with a mixture of baseball caps, fleeces and coats thrown in as well, all in the same depressing colour, kinda think McDonald's grey. When I'm sat in the trailer opposite the toilet block, on at the cafe door, or even walking around litter picking, it's very obvious that I work here, even when the logos on my clothes aren't visible. Yet I constantly get, "Excuse me, do you work here?" or "Do you know where XYZ is?" Like, lady, this isn't a fashion choice. My other job as a car parking steward at a football club also has these types of morons. One exit for the grounds is to a retail park, and we close the gate for this on match days, to stop people trying to sneak in without paying to park, and to reduce traffic and keep everyone safe. My uniform for this is shirt and tie, with a bright yellow high-vis, with match day steward on the back. And I still get questions like, "Do you work here then?" or "Oh, is there a match on today?" whilst I'm stood surrounded by fans wearing football shirts. No, of course not, I just enjoy wearing this ugly-ass jacket on a perfectly good Saturday. The next one is titled, "I'm not 12, so this didn't happen directly to me but to a co-worker I was on shift with." I used to work as a lifeguard and had a co-worker who looked extremely young for her age, we were both 17 at the time, who was watching the main pool by herself as there were very few people in that day. Our pool had a policy of no backflips off of the diving board because of a messy accident in the past. Two boys about 14 or 15 years old were doing backflips off of it, so she approached them and asked them to stop as it was against the rules. To which they responded, "What are you, 12? And she responded, "No, I'm 17 and work here, and you can't be doing backflips." They proceeded to ignore her even after she told them to leave the pool. Our supervisor had to come out of the office and tell them off. They listened to her because she could be scary. For clarification, I was also in the office at the time on my break. She was clearly wearing the bright red shirt saying lifeguard. The next one is titled, "Just Trying to Keep You Safe." I work for a public transit agency in maintenance. Every spring our city has a certain flower festival with parades, fair, fleet week, etc. And it's a big deal. In 2015 I volunteered to monitor a train stop downtown during one of the parades. My job was to politely inform people to stay behind the white line on the edge of the platform to make sure they don't get hit by a train, because if you do get hit you lose. Most people oblige. And it was packed. I told one lady she needed to be behind the line and she turns around and rudely asks me, "Why, do you work for public transit agency?" I am wearing public transit agency hat, public transit agency shirt, public transit agency lanyard and my public transit agency ID badge. I wanted to tell her no, I am just cosplaying to bug people like you. However, I didn't get a chance to respond with anything because a transit cop walking by yelled at her to move back behind the line. Transit cops are not obligated to be nice. I am guessing he heard her talk to me. He made me jump when he yelled, but I so appreciated him. The next one is titled, "Checkmate Nosy." I'm 22 years old. I have an invisible disability which makes my joints feel like I'm being stabbed and makes my knee swell up. You probably know where this is going already. At college we have lifts from the ground floor to the 4th floor. One in the middle of each wing and one either side of the central building. A few days ago my knee was acting up as I was walking, so I headed over to the lifts and knelt down to get my foldable walking stick out of my bag. Currently the lifts have signs asking people not to use them unless they're disabled to prevent the spread of a certain virus. As I'm pulling my stick out, a girl behind me says, "Excuse me," but I ignore her BC I didn't think she was talking to me. Then she moves closer and repeats herself, so I look up. She looks at me, wrinkles her nose, and says, "The lift is only for disabled people, you have to use the stairs. Are you disabled? You don't look disabled." I stare at her silently as I remove the thingy from my walking stick, unfold it, and fit it together. I lean heavily on it as I stand up and say, "Sorry, were you talking to me?" She walks away and I limp into the lift with a smug grin. The next one is titled, "Wrong Federal Agency." So I work for a certain federal agency that makes sure your Amazon packages and bills arrive the same day. This happened a couple winters ago and it was hard to believe this guy thought what he did. So the winter before I was promoted, I was working on a route and it was fairly cold, around -40-degree windshield, and I was getting towards the end of the workday and still had lots of mail and packages to deliver. Well, after I did my rounds of delivering mail from the point I was parked at, I was getting ready to deliver packages that I knew I couldn't carry and were in the direction I had to go to for my next park point. While I was preparing this and ready to drive off, a gentleman from a house I delivered managed to pull out of their driveway and started to drive in that same direction as I. Now for this next part, I want to preface by saying there were 3 blocks from where I was to the next part one needed to park at. On the first block where the gentleman was and I was at, I dropped off a pack. On the opposite side of the street, the gentleman was in his car at the edge of the driveway. As I went back to my van, he got to the end of the block that had a stop sign. We both drove to the second block and he proceeded to pull over to the curb, as I also pulled over to deliver 2 packages. Then, he proceeded to pull back out and go to the end of the second block, as I was ready to go on to the third and final block to start my round of delivering mail again. So I was behind him, and coincidentally, we both went to the third and final block. He pulls over again. Oddly enough, I come up and I proceed to go and park and warm up by sitting in the van for a bit. The following conversation ensues. Me CG, crazy guy pulls up next to me, hi, what can I do for ya? CG, how are you doing? Me, fine, what can I do for you? He stares at me for a few seconds. I'm a bit worried. CG, why are you following me? Me, I'm not, I'm the mailman. CG, you sure? You were following me a while. Me, gestures to the logo on the van. I have enough work to do rather than follow you. I'm the mailman. CG, I just think it's funny how you came all the way up here by me. Me, yeah, I have to warm up, it's cold outside. This is where I park. CG, alright. Then drives away. I was honestly shocked on why, let alone how he thought I intentionally was following him. I'm cold, I'm busy, and even though I was essentially working around him, he kept thinking I was following him. Still funny to this day, and if I ever get the chance to do that route again, I can't wait to make it seem like I am following him for my amusement. The next one is titled, Yeah, That's Me. I work in a student accommodation as security on weekends. I lived in the building for 3 years when I was studying and worked as an RA for that time too, so I know everything about this place. We get deliveries and other visitors every day. Whenever they knock on the door and I answer, I'm greeted with, "Oh, I'm looking for security or reception," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's me," every single time. They can literally see me sitting at reception, wearing a security lanyard and company t-shirt, and yet they still don't think I'm security. I've had several times people come in to check in and they've stood at the desk not talking to me because they assume I don't work here for some reason, even though I am at the desk literally asking if they need help with anything. I don't know if it's because I'm young or because I'm a woman, but it's really pissing me off. It happens every single shift. The next one is titled, You Can't Be Behind the Bar. Context, I'm the night cook at a local bar and grill, 5 to 6 nights a week. If servers are busy, we'll take orders to the bar, and I get pop from the drink station in there because we only have Coke in the bar. Last night was busy due to darts, and I hate to bother the bartender if they're busy, so I will just help myself. Yes, they're all fine with this. After shutting down the kitchen and taking out my garbage, I was thirsty, so I walked behind the bar. The bartender is busy mixing drinks, so I said I was going to grab a glass and get some pop. She had no problem with this. However, this drunk guy sitting at the bar decided that it was his job to tell me what to do. He says, "Excuse me, ma'am, you can't be back there." At the same time, the bartender and I both say that I work here. 2 more times he repeats himself, "You need to leave, you can't be back there." I kept telling him that I work there, I'm the cook. He finally gave up when, I think it was his girlfriend, smacked him in the arm and told him to leave me alone. Lol, some people just can't mind their own business. The next one is titled, This Isn't Even Your Yard, Dude. I, 26F, work as a meter reader for the city government where I live. Usually, my job is to drive around town with a radio in my truck that picks up electronic reads from all the utility meters. The data I collect is used for creating utility bills. Since I'm technically not in the water department or the street department, I've never been required to wear a uniform or reflective gear of any kind. But I do have the option to wear reflective gear if I want to. I usually don't wear a vest because I'm usually sitting alone in my truck, or if I get out of the truck, my marked work truck is nearby with the flashing beacon on. Every now and then, we have trouble with water meters not picking up, and I have to go figure out what's wrong. Some water meters are super easy to locate, but some older water meters are in unusual places or just really hard to see, uncover because they haven't been uncovered for a while. Okay, so one afternoon I'm looking for a water meter, using my 4 feet long metal stick with a hook on the end that opens the meter lids to shift debris as I go. All of a sudden a man stops his truck in the middle of the road and hollers out his window, "Do you need any help?" I say thanks but no, and keep looking. The man then pulls his truck into the closest driveway, gets out of this truck and approaches me. He asks again if I need any help. I explain that what I'm looking for but tell him I think I've just found the meter I had. He then goes, "Oh well, the water line runs this way, 1 meter is right over here," points to a meter I already checked, "and there's also some meters right here," points to 2 more meters I had already checked. At this point I'm absolutely peeved. I've repeatedly told him I do not need help as I've already found what I'm looking for, but he's not going away. So I ask if he lives in the house whose yard I'm standing in, and he says, "Oh no, I live 3 houses down." I make an excuse about needing something from my truck and he finally leaves, but before he drives off he asks if I need a shovel and I flatly say no. I have about 3 in my truck plus all the other tools I need to do my job. It is literally my job to locate these things. Does this man ask bartenders if they need help making drinks? The next one is titled, "The Inherent Sexism in Construction." Being a woman in the construction, there's a myriad of ways to be taken as someone who doesn't belong. It was made especially easy at my last job, where I would visit the majority of my job sites once a week to collect paperwork, and again once a month for a meeting. One morning, I was getting out of my car on a site about an hour from my home. It was early, almost 7 a.m., and the coffee I sucked down on my trip hadn't hit me yet. I'm one of those people who's barely functional for the first hour or 2 after waking. Any conversation results in a resting witch face while I process your words. I stepped out of my car. I was parked in a special lot that was put aside for people going on that specific site. I make my way to the other side of my car to put on my vest and hard hat, and grab my laptop for the meeting. But before I get to open my door, I'm stopped. Some guy, working on site for the same contractor as we are but not for us, tells me, "This parking is for people on the job site only." I agree. It was phrased as statement, so I didn't think anything of it, just confirmed that he was in fact correct. But then he kept repeating, "This parking is for people on the job site only." Had he come 1 minute later maybe I would have passed for someone who belonged with my safety gear on, but I sure as hell wasn't going to open my car door in this situation to grab my stuff. After a bit of repetitive back and forth, I get annoyed and gestured to the job site, "Can I go now? I have a meeting on the job site." "Yeah, oh, then you're parked in the right place, I know." I get my things and go to the office trailer. The coffee finally hits me a couple hours later. I realize he didn't think I belonged here, because I am a woman, on a construction site. The next one is titled, "Got the Cops Called on Me." So I'm not exactly sure if this belongs here, because it wasn't actually at work. Also, don't steal my story and I'm on mobile. So here are my characters, me 28F, Bill next door neighbor, 70 to 80 OM. Carol, crazy dingbat across the street. DF dear fiancé, Bill, brother-in-law, or my fiancé's brother. So I've been in my home for about 5 years now. Now my DF and I are technically renters, but DF's brother owns our home. He pretty much said we can do whatever we want as long as it doesn't destroy the property value. We have been exclusively in charge of maintenance for 5 years, both interior and exterior. We've always had an issue with Carol, from her trying to get a petition to get my dog removed from the neighborhood to her bad-mouthing us to neighbors because our property looks trashy. I will admit, we have a large dog, and he can get aggressive when you encroach on his territory. But what German Shepherd isn't defensive of his mama? As for our property looking trashy, we had a dead tree we were waiting for the city to remove, and they did. Why would I pay $800 to remove a tree around power lines when the city does it for free since it was within 3 feet of the curb? Anyways, that was just some insight as to why Carol is well, Carol. So Bill is a nice guy. Waves and chit-chats, but nothing serious. Over the summer we had a poison ivy outbreak in our yard. Since Bill's driveway is close to the grove with the ivy, I gave him a heads up and told him we were removing it. He informed us he's incredibly allergic to poison ivy, and he's actually been hospitalized. It's gotten so bad. Glad I let him know. We dug up what we could and sprayed a ton of killer on the ivy. But being poison ivy, it came back because some of the root was under a tree root and we couldn't get it all up. No biggie, we kept digging it up as best we could. My Bill knows about this and said fine. We also had some bushes out front we want removed. Again, Bill said as long as it doesn't end up being a complete mess, go ahead. So we dig up our bushes. They're currently stumps in our front yard, with a pile of actual bush broken down and prepared to go out on the next leaf pickup. Organized piles. We also did a little more poison ivy cleanup. I also noticed on the far side of Bill's yard, one of his trees has a poison ivy vine. I informed him of this, and told him if he wants, I will do what I can to cut it down and dig it up. He said great because he doesn't want to deal with it. So I've got my bag with the ivy trimmings. I head over to Bill's. I clip and rip up the ivy as best I could. Then the cops show up to Carol's. I'm wondering if it was a call for her sick husband who's needed EMS a few times this summer. Then they come over to me and ask what I'm doing. Apparently they got a call I was illegally destroying property. I was honestly dumbfounded. I told them that no, I don't technically live here, I was at Bill's house, but I had the homeowner's permission. They were told I was cutting trees. Definitely not. It was clear I wasn't cutting trees. His tree trunk is about 12 to 18 inches, with little pruning shears. Told the cops I'm cutting and killing his poison ivy because he's allergic to it. I sarcastically offered them to peek in the bag and they said no. Such a shame, who wouldn't want to see a bag of poison ivy? Then they had to ask me about my house. I guess when Carol called, she said I was going around digging up someone's grove. It's true, I was digging up part of the grove at my house. That had poison ivy in it. I was also reported for destroying trees. Again, they were bushes that I had the okay to cut. Like seriously, you crazy bat? We're mid-pandemic. And you're gonna call the cops because I trashed my own yard by cutting bushes out and cut my neighbor's poison ivy? If she wasn't 80 plus, I would probably take petty revenge, seeing as that's worked in the past. I really thought we were over this because she's been quiet for a few years. She's also called the cops on us for breaking our city's leash law because our dog was tied in our front yard. We were playing with the dog and raking leaves. But he was on a runner chain, not a leash, so she called. This happened more during our first 2 to 3 years at the house. Wanna know the best part? The Bill who owns the house is a city cop. She's tried to go to him so many times and he tells her to mind her business. But they had a party. Okay, no underage drinking, everyone gone before 11. But they have 3 cars. Okay, and they're all registered, insured and kept up. Once she didn't get a response from the homeowner, she started calling the actual police. She was given a warning 2 years ago about her harassment and misuse of emergency services, which stopped her. The next one is titled, Yes, He is African, and yes, he is also a scientist. This is my wife's work. Her anecdote, not mine. With Wowood, my wife's work, which is a local biolab, had hired a security firm to make sure people are conforming to Wowood protocol. She works in the lab portion of the site. There is also a loading dock. Many of the workers in the loading dock are first-generation immigrants, and many of them are African. A newish employee to the lab, a scientist, was trying to get in the lab entrance, and the security guard wouldn't let him in. Told him to go on the loading dock entrance. The guy had ID proving he was a lab person and he still wouldn't be let in. No one was present to help him out, and as a new employee he didn't have anyone's number that was at the site yet. So he has to go on the back door. Like it was the ducking 50s or something. Edit, alright, so follow-up appears to be mixed. The scientist didn't push the issue, but people acting on his behalf brought it up to our. They then made a statement to the security firm. They said they would retrain the employee. During retraining, the employee quit. So action was taken, though not strong action. Most important, the employee will not be harassed by that guard anymore. The next one is titled, I am 25, not 15. When I was 25, I had a job at an intermediate high school, 9th and 10th grade students, as the administrative assistant in the counseling office. A few times a week I would fill in at the main office to cover lunch breaks or help during busy times. On this particular day the phones were going crazy and several parents and students were waiting at the front counter. I finished a call and moved to the counter to start helping. Me, how can I help you? Parent, oh. Are you a student? Never mind. I'll wait until Mrs. Older Secretary is available. I said okay and began helping others. It was easily 5 minutes before the other secretary was available to help this parent, so she just waited. Apparently she was oblivious to the fact that I was answering everyone else's questions with ease, was wearing a staff lanyard and name badge, and also wearing a wedding ring. I might look young, but those should be giveaways that I'm not a 14 to 15-year-old student in this particular school. Mrs. Older Secretary asks what she needs. Parent, I need this specific form for my student. How do I do that? Mrs. Older Secretary, Mrs. Younger Secretary here does all of those. She can help you. Parent turns bright red and just stares me. Then had the nerve to say to Mrs. Older Secretary, are you sure you can't help me? Me, no ma'am. I'm the only person authorized to do that form. If you don't mind waiting another 10 minutes, I can go back to my office and get it for you. 15 years later, that woman still gives me dirty looks when she sees me out in the community. I'm still not sure why. I was perfectly polite even when she thought I didn't work there. The next one is titled, Substitute Teacher Thinks I'm 14 Inches. Preface, occurred pre-WOWID-19. I am a brown, 25M with tattoos up and down both arms and a younger looking face. I work as an instructional assistant at a high school in a large public school district. I support students in their general education classes who qualify for special education support. Story, I arrived in geometry class to support one of my students. I walked in as usual and stood directly beside my student near the front of the class to chat while we waited for class to begin. The substitute teacher saw me standing there chatting and made a beeline directly toward me. Standing inches in front of my face, she yelled, and I mean screamed, "Get to your seat, class is going to begin," in the snarkiest, rudest tone possible. I looked at her inquisitively, held up my staff ID hanging on a lanyard from my neck, and said, "I'm actually an IA and this is one of my students." She had a strange look of bewilderment on her face, as if she didn't believe me, which then curled up into a frown. She then proceeded to continue screaming at me, only this time it was to tell me about how students from the classes prior to this class were terrible and how all the students at this school were awful to her. She asked if I could get security to remove students from her classroom because they wouldn't listen to her. I stared her dead in the face for a solid 10 seconds, said nothing and then turned and asked my student to get up and go to the library to work with me. I feel terrible for any student who have been forced to endure this lady as an instructor. I reported the incident to my department head and administrators and she will not be returning to our school. She, and many others, are the reason I am currently back in college to attain my master's and teaching certificate. So thanks for that, evil lady.